All right. First of all, hello, ladies. Hello, 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 and welcome to Love Begins with You, a journey to self-discovery. My name is Christal Jordan, and I am joined by my partner in this endeavor, Love Begins with You, S&M Jones.
Yes, I'm super excited to be here, but more importantly, I'm excited to see you guys here as well. So let's get this journey started. I love it.
Absolutely. Well, we decided to do this. We talked a couple of months ago. We're talking about our books. And I know that 2025 has been a very difficult year for most people, specifically Black women. And so, with us being authors with books specifically designed for women of color, we thought that, wrapping the year up with this conversation, opportunity to kind of love on each other, have conversations, with other women of color that may be needing a reboot, maybe needing a restart. This, to end the year, we thought that would be a great opportunity. So we welcome you to come in. If you're watching this live, we really want this to be interactive. If you are watching the replay, you can still be interactive, all of that good stuff. But what about you, SNM? Because we've talked about this, your book, Black Women Need Love Too. I don't think there could be a year more fitting for this book.
To be honest, this is definitely near and dear to my heart, particularly since, as you can see, I am a Black woman. But not only that, watching how society has seemed to turn its back on Black women or made Black women, no matter how many times we progressed or how much progression we've made, there seems to be some type of discord, especially amongst our counterparts here in regards to Black women in general. And so I kind of wanted to unpack where we are, how did we get here, and what brought us most importantly to this point, and how can we come out of this? How can we start, I'm going to use the word clawing our way back to each other and out of the top. But at the end of the day, no matter how many times we try to work with each other and claw our way to each other, it doesn't help if we don't even love ourselves. And so this is why I'm so excited about this workshop or this opportunity to have this interactive session, because we have this huge platform to basically help other women get to know not only themselves, but also for those who think they do know themselves. Sometimes it's good to be around like-minded sisters who can speak into existence things that you may want or speak life into you. I think speaking life into each other is something that's really important for us to do as Black women.
Absolutely. I agree totally. And I know we're going to introduce ourselves to you guys a little bit more. But before we do that, we want to make sure that everyone joining, if you guys can share your location and where you're tuning in from, and also one word to describe your personal 2025 love journey. I will say that I am tuning in. I'm here from Atlanta, Georgia. And my name is Christal Jordan. Again, I'm the author of Dear Alpha Female Is Not Him, It's You. And I have been an author and an editor. I'm an editor for Lennox and Parker magazine. But I was an entertainment publicist here in Atlanta for probably around, I don't even know if I want to say how many years. That may age me horribly. But went from being a writer to publicity and then returned to writing. And one of the things that I've always, women of color, most of my clients were women of color. And as a writer, even as an editor for several magazines, my focus has always been women of color. So this book, writing this book was definitely something that was a passion for me, because not only did it tell my story, but it also told a lot of the stories of the women that I've had the pleasure of working with or even have been friends with. And so it really was a labor of love. But I think if I were to give one word to describe my 2025 love journey, it would be exhausting. I've had an exhausting year. I went through some family difficulty. I'm a newlywed still, sort of. We're kind of on the back end of the newlywed. We've been married 5 years now. This was a particularly difficult year, settling in. We had this blissful, first few years, and then this was one of those like, what are you made of years? So I would say my 2025 love journey has been extremely exhausting.
You know what? Interesting enough, I can actually feel that, because I want to describe mine as exhausting. So first, let me run back who I am, S&M Jones. I'm coming from Virginia, and I know it sounds weird because I do have an accent. So just so you know, this accent is from Bama. Yes, Alabama. And so if you hear it slide out, that's why. But I actually currently reside in Virginia. And so I'm also an author. I originally started writing psychological thriller / suspense. And then somewhere along the way, we won't say when certain people were elected, but I went ahead, and after just seeing kind of how the tide was changing, I went ahead and switched to nonfiction and wrote my first nonfiction, Black Women Need Love Too, a book about relationships, self-love, and community, because there seems to be such a detriment in our community, and that pertains to narrative. So my background is actually social work. And so with this background in social work, and I have a master's in community services. Well, I have a master's in human services, specializing in social and community programs and services. So I'm all about giving back to the community in general, but specifically to Black women and children. No shade to Black men, but of course, once again, I got to start where we need to start at with us. Now, with that being said, I'm super excited about how to describe my journey. So I've been married for all my life. As a matter of fact, I can honestly say my entire adult life. And so it has been, I would like to say complicated. I would also like to say that, so we're only supposed to use one word. So make sure you drop that one word to describe your love journey. And so I think complicated will be the best way I can describe it, because you have your ebbs and your flows, your ups and your downs, of course. And then you have where you have your own doubts, and then you have their doubts, and it's navigating between your doubts, their doubts, your growth, because like I said, I've been with them my entire adult life. And so as you're growing, he's growing. And so my journey has been complicated, but it's also been basically just an understanding of who we are as individuals and who we are as a couple. And that's also why I'm going to sum up with complicated. But I'm loving the chat with the preparation, healing. Whew.
Those are great. Those are great words. I think I love preparation. I love both of those, but preparation, I think, this was something, like I said, that we wanted to do to kind of, end the year on a positive note. Aside from just romantic relationships, we know that over 300,000 Black women lost their jobs this year. I'm assuming just from the climate of social media that a lot of relationships have been stressed because of that. A lot of people have been feeling a lot of anxiety due to, again, like you said, the political landscape right now in our country has a lot of people feeling anxious, a lot of people feeling hopeless, fearful. So I love Tina Bree said peaceful. That is a beautiful thing. We're aspiring to be where you are, So let's share a little bit before we kind of delve into the workshop, because what we wanted to do is kind of share a little bit from both of our books. I am absolutely, when I read Black Women Need Love Too, I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to do something together, because I love the fact that you do come from a social and historical perspective with so many things that we are dealing with, so many stereotypes, so many negative tropes in our community that need to be explained. So before we kind of get into all that, let's talk a little bit about the purpose for tonight, besides just being, a journey to self-discovery. We really wanted to focus on 4 tenets tonight, which are accountability, healing, softness, and then joy, right? And kind of, in that order. So I'll ask you this first, S&M, how do you define accountability?
Whew. So that's a great question. And, as they say, women, for some reason, we avoid accountability. As to be honest, we had a t-shirt for the BLC pod, because I'm also a co-host of the BLC pod. And we have a t-shirt that say accountable, and it say yes, no, and then it say AF. And they were joking, because I'm, of course, on the pod with a bunch of men, and they were joking, hey, for women, we need to say NA. And I said, well, why do we have to say NA? Like, at the minimum, can we say maybe? Because sometimes we're accountable, sometimes we're not. It just depends on the situation and the circumstances, because what someone else may hold us accountable for, we may not necessarily hold ourselves accountable for, because they're not taking in the full context of the situation. And as a matter of fact, when I said that, they said that's exactly why we said NA. So for me, right. So for me, accountability is not only holding yourself accountable to the standards that you set, but also holding yourself accountable as far as holding not the standard, as well as enforcing and implementing the standard that you set for yourself. So if you have any goals or ambitions, or even if it's personal, even if it's relationship wise, even if it's business related, holding yourself accountable is when you're meeting those goals. And if you're not meeting those goals, as an example, then what are you doing in between to meet those goals? Are you readjusting? Are you recalibrating? And how do you recalibrate? So all of that is also part of holding yourself accountable. When we think about accountable, because that's like a click phrase right now, like, oh, women don't hold themselves accountable. And you can see it in the chat, like the men haters, like, oh, she's not accountable. You heard me go tick, 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 because that's what I envision when these guys are writing that. And so to me, it's just like, if you truly want to be accountable, the first person you have to be accountable is to you. But if you're in a relationship, you also have to recognize and give space to being accountable to that person as well, as long as that accountability does not conflict, to me, with being accountable to yourself, i.e. holding yourself to a certain standard and implementing that standard and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I think, my book kind of focuses on, I guess my focus when I think about the women around me and even myself is accountability is often looked at as it's my fault, right? And so I think that a lot of times women, specifically us career women, because I know that there's like a negative stereotype attached to the alpha female. And in that, I just mean women that are very, they take control of their lives. They're not waiting around. They're not waiting on a savior. They're out there doing the work to better themselves and their families. But I think a lot of times when people are asking for accountability, it's mistaken as people are trying to point the finger at me. And I feel bad about myself if I were to say this is something that I could have done wrong. And so I think that it is actually should be the very first step that we do. Before you point a finger at someone else, you should take a look at yourself. But I think that we have to learn, specifically as women of color, that taking a look at yourself and assessing, like you said, recalibrating is not, there doesn't have to be shame or guilt attached to that. It can truly be an opportunity to become better, to learn, to grow, to stretch. And so I think all of that, I think that, when you look at business and you hear people say, you have to take losses to learn and to get better. I don't think we often relate that to our own personal journeys. Like, we don't want to be wrong ever. We don't want to be, out of line ever. But if you're not, you won't learn to grow. So I think accountability to me is an opportunity to grow, and it's an opportunity to become a better version of yourself. So that is, I look at it like that. And I hope that we can start to kind of shift the conversation to where we can, start to really embrace being accountable, so that more women are stepping up and growing, learning from mistakes, learning how they can be a better version of themselves, and reaching out to grow, to get to that next level.
So, I actually think that's amazing when we talk about growing, because that's how I view this entire workshop, as an opportunity for us to grow together and learn together, and how we can move past that as far as this word accountability that seems so broad and over-encompassing, so to speak, right? Because that's ultimately what we are and what we do. And I will acknowledge that as Black women, and this is something that I touch on in my book, is that as Black women, we technically do hold ourselves accountable, but we hold ourselves accountable to hold everybody else up. We hold ourselves accountable to make sure everybody else is good before we make sure we're good. And that's where that self-love, self-care comes in, because we spend so much time holding everybody else up, holding the world on our shoulders, that we don't actually take the time to take a look at ourselves. And that ends up manifesting itself in like anxiety, and manifests itself in depression, and manifests itself in physical symptoms and ailments that we have a tendency to ignore. As a matter of fact, while we do go to the doctor, we go to the doctor at the absolute last minute because we too busy. We ain't got time for that. And so that's another way of trying to have that growth, so that when we're holding ourselves accountable, it's not just accountable to everybody else, but how do we take that time and take that step back to hold ourselves accountable to ourselves, is the way that I also view this accountability.
Yeah, well, I'm struggling with that. I will let you know, as an accountability sister, I struggle with that, because I don't always. I definitely will reassess and look at myself, specifically because I kind of like have that overachiever attitude, so I always want to get it right. But when it comes to actually taking the time to be accountable to myself, that is definitely something I still struggle with, which kind of leads to the next tenet which we have, which is healing. And that's something I've learned as of late. And I'm sure you can kind of speak to this from a more clinical perspective. But I feel like we hear the word healing, and a lot of times we think of it in terms of relationships, or we think of it in terms of like trauma from our past. You know, I talk a lot in my book about the fact that my father was not in my life, you know, and that was something that I definitely had to heal from, feeling rejected from my father. But and then you have different situations that you go through, you know, as a young adult and as an adult. But I did not realize that healing really takes rest. Healing to is not something that you can do in real time. It means you really have to understand the situation and take time to sit in that and rest. And I don't feel like a lot of us actually do that. We want to heal in real time as we're moving on to the next thing. So, you know, an example could be, I want to heal while I am still dating, heal from heartbreak while I am still dating other people, heal from childhood trauma while I am pursuing this degree and working after school and taking care of children and tending to other people. And at the base of that, I don't feel like you really get an opportunity to heal. When we are in survival mode, healing does not happen. What happens is you bury things, you pile things over, you look for substitutes, you do things that distract you, but there's not an opportunity for real healing, which is why so often I think when you see people get to the top of the hill, when they get to that, you know, high level executive job, or they get to that goal that they've been trying to reach, and they realize they're very unhappy or they feel unfulfilled. They still have that little child, that little girl inside of them is still, you know, afraid, or feels vulnerable and feels, you know, insecure. And so I really want you to speak to, how can we kind of embrace the idea of healing in a healthier way? Because I think we use that word, we throw it around, oh, I'm healed from that. But what that really means a lot of times is, I have moved on. Time has passed, but I haven't really allowed myself the space and the grace to genuinely deal with what I'm trying to heal from. Does that make sense?
So it does. And you know what's so interesting about the word healing is that when we think of healing, sometimes we think of in medical terms, right? So I got a cut, I put some Neosporin on it, and now that cut is healed. And we
Mhm.
don't think about the emotional scars. We don't think about those psychological scars that are planted on us. And we just say, oh, I'm healed because I've moved on from it, not recognizing that that too can fester within us. That too can manifest itself as anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses and so forth that we may experience. And when I say mental illness, I'm not referring to like, oh, she's schizophrenic or anything like that. I mean, as far as these things that we deal with on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, they said that Black women are more likely to exhibit anxiety and depression just from day-to-day microaggressions that we have to face when we go out into this world. So when we talk about healing, so I love the fact that you talked about this survival, right? Because let's be honest, we're still in survival mode. Like, we are literally still in survival mode. So everybody's healing journey is going to be different, because how can you heal if you stay in survival? So most people feel like, well, okay, I'm going to do what I can now, without recognizing doing what you can now is still detrimental to you if you actually don't take the time to fully sit in what you're actually trying to do. Like, so for example, you mentioned the relationship aspect as far as, oh, I had this major heartbreak and now I'm going to move on to the next relationship. Because, you know, there is a saying, the best way to get over a man is to get under another man, right? And so we sometimes go in with that mentality, not recognizing that there needs to be a break right in between there, because you need to heal yourself. And sometimes that healing looks like closure. But I'm going to say this though, we have to be careful with the word closure, because sometimes closure for one person open up a can of worms for another person. And not all relationships or activities require closure, because sometimes that causes more harm. So when we think about healing, it has to be, first of all, you have to define what exactly do you need to be healed from. So many of us don't even believe in counseling, as an example, because the first thing you think of is like, well, why have to go to somebody else to listen to me to talk about something that I already know? Because a lot of times we do research, especially if you are alpha female, You don't already research your issue. You don't already looked up ways to mitigate it. You know, you don't already figured out like maybe I just need to do this or maybe I just need to do that, and not recognizing that it just can't be you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that external help. And the best part about external help, it doesn't necessarily have to be a actual official counselor, although I do encourage that. It could be something like this,
Mhm.
as something as simple as this. It could be something as simple as your best friend, as long as your best friend is not toxic and doing woo for things, toxic behaviors, you know. And so when we talk about healing, it has to first start with you defining what exactly you need to heal from. Someone can say, I need to heal from childhood trauma. Well, what childhood trauma? Is it the mother wound? Is it the father wound, i.e., absentee? Is it from siblings? Is it from, or if you're in a relationship, what part of that relationship did you need to heal from? Is it the fact that you stayed too long? Is it the fact that you didn't want to let go, or you saw red flags, but you are, so now you need to self-reflect and figure out, why did I see all these red flags, but I stayed? You
Mhm.
know, so what do you need healing from? And once you define what you need that healing from, and like I said, as alpha females, we have a tendency to go and look up the ways we could do it ourselves and figure out. But sometimes it's just a matter of talking it out. And even if it means talking to you can't get it done, but then putting a plan of action in place. And you guys all know about plan of actions because, you know, we got a plan for everything. So you need to put a plan of action of how you want to heal
Mhm.
without forcing a timeline for that. And
Right.
that's where we go wrong. We have a tendency to force a timeline
Mhm.
for when I should heal, how I should heal, and no one should dictate to you your healing journey.
I want to say right before we move on to the next one, because I remember, I definitely relate to that. If you guys are just joining again, this is Love Begins With You, a journey to self-discovery. Myself, Christal Jordan, and S&M Jones. We're both authors for books geared towards women of color. And tonight is just a love session where we're going to love on each other, love on you all. We want the chat to be as interactive as possible as we kind of go through this workshop. But we're talking about healing, and I think that one of the things that, to your point, a lot of times, you know, we want to definitely, you know, go to Google now, go to Chat GPT, figure out what can I do, because there has been a idea, and I know in my own journey where that came from. I had very strong, amazing women, you know, in my family, and so my mother and my grandmother were great leaders, you know, of the family, but they were very much like, you got to get over it. You know what I mean? Like you don't just sit in it, you got to move past it. And so I would feel like if I spent too much time crying, you know, I would feel guilty. I'd feel like, oh, I'm being weak. My granny said, you got to get up and keep it moving. My mom's like, get over it. You got to move past it. And so I think that is, you know, common in a lot of African American families, specifically with women. You know, we want to push our daughters. I even feel myself doing that with my own daughter sometimes, and I have to stop myself and say, you know, I have to allow her to feel and not try to push her forward. And that really isn't because we're not trying to make sure they're okay. I think it's because there was a fear. You don't want your Black daughter to miss out or not be able to get herself together. You don't want her to be hurt. So, you know, like that fierce grizzly bear, you try push, you're fine, go, go, go. But the reality is that puts her in survival mode, and it's not healthy. And so I think that, to your point, timelines are dangerous, you know, and feeling like how I feel right now is wrong. And then also, sometimes you don't really know what you need to heal from. Sometimes you can have issues and you may not be able to um, you know, prescribe or dictate what your issues are. I know myself when I went to therapy, and I actually went on Yama Fix My Life, and I had some stuff going on that I didn't even recognize. It was coming from a very different place than I initially thought, you know. And so that's why I think it's beneficial sometimes to sit down with a therapist, even not so much a friend, because a lot of times we surround ourselves with like-minded people. So
Mm-hmm.
they may have similar issues and not be able to, you know, just prescribe their own problems. So I think sometimes a professional, be it a life coach, be it a therapist, be it, you know, a counselor, can be a help to kind of give you that perspective that you may not have, you know, when they're able to listen to you from an objective standpoint.
So I just want to do two things. The first one, I want to point out that what you described was the beginning of the strong, independent Black woman narrative. The way you're treating your daughter, the way we've been taught to suck it up, that's actually that's the beginning of us transitioning that generational stereotype and narrative to the next generation by saying that we need to suck it up because at the end of the day, no one care about our tears, right? But at the minimum, we need to care about our tears.
Mhm.
And so that's actually how we start pushing forward that particular narrative. And I saw that there's a question of like, what other narratives? So we talked about, the healing journey and so forth. So since this is a self-love, self-care workshop,
Mhm.
then what journey or what narrative are you releasing tonight?
Mhm.
Is there a particular thought process? Is there a particular activity? Is there a particular narrative that you're going to release tonight as we go through this, or at least start? Because sometimes you can speak it, and then once you speak it into existence, i.e., the narrative of what you want to release, then it's easier to do so. So I
Mhm.
would love folks to put that in the chat as far as what narrative are you planning on releasing tonight, or just to get started. And I'll even start. So I too am guilty of being that strong, independent Black woman. And
Mhm.
so I too struggle sometimes with the whole interdependence
Yes.
as it comes to people, relationships, particularly in my
Mhm.
relationship. And so finding a way to so I would like to release this narrative from myself,
You got to put that
right?
in the chat. Put it in the chat there. Anthony. Put it in the chat. The interdependence that you are releasing. Okay, thank you. Fresh Perspective Coaching says true healing and accountability both require a level of self-awareness that we sometimes lack. I'm learning it's okay not to have all the answers. Seeking help when needed is perfectly fine. I love that. Very, very true. Like I said, we want to have all the answers. I am, I would be honest that the independent and feeling like I should be in another place, like rushing myself is something that I definitely want to release tonight. That idea that where you are is exactly where you are supposed to be is something I know is true, but I have a really hard time um, actually walking in that, right? So what I want to release tonight, that what is for me, where I am exactly where I am supposed to be. I should not be further. I should not be to the side. I should not be in another place. I am exactly the idea that I am not where I'm supposed to be is something that I'm going to release tonight. Let me put that in the chat.
I love that. I'm about to release this right now. I'm releasing this strong, independent Black woman narrative. It is okay to ask for help. Like right now, I'm asking for help right now with these lights. I'm just kidding. In the chat.
So okay, so the next point in tonight's conversation is, so we said accountability and then healing, because I think it's really important to have accountability in order to be able to heal, right? Because if you haven't taken a realistic look at what the issues are, it's hard to heal. And then once you do know that, and you have have an understanding of what it is and what you need to heal, then I think that's the only way we can get to softness, right? Softness is that next word. And we hear a lot, we hear so often, and this is a safe space so we can all discuss it. There's this idea that this negative stereotype that's not true, that Black women are not soft. And that is absolutely not true. But I think what happens is, because so many of us are operating in fear. Have you ever seen an animal that is afraid? That animal is on the defense. And a lot of times, because of fear of being hurt, because of fear of being not enough, because of fear of being rejected, we have this very defensive exterior up, and it comes off as hard. I was watching a Pop the Balloon earlier today, and this very ignorant gentleman was saying to this woman that, I need a soft woman. She's too strong. She's too strong. Well, I believe that you can be both strong and soft. I don't think that strength is the opposite of softness. I think that fear is the opposite of softness. And so when we're operating in fear, then we are not soft. Think about it when you're in a relationship with a man that you don't trust. You don't trust him, then you are afraid of having to, shoulder the load yourself. You're afraid of something going bad. And then you have this tough exterior up because you're fighting. You're prepared to fight. When a person is going to war, they cannot be soft. They've got to be on guard. And so I think that a lot of us are prepared to fight, and that keeps our softness covered up. I don't think that I know that it's not that we don't possess it, it's that fear has blocked it. And so I think that we have to, first of all, realize that that narrative is absolutely false. Black women are soft, Black women are feminine, but often Black women, for good reason, have been afraid, have been unprotected. And so we have to put ourselves in a position to where we are protected and we are not afraid. And in order to do that, it takes a lot of this self-awareness and it starts with self-love. So I just wanted to say that. We have some comments I want to read before you start S&M on that, because I know you definitely have some good stuff on that in your book. Nikki says, the idea that I can't care for a child because I physically can't have kids and that I'm somehow less valuable. She is releasing that tonight. We are with you. We want you to release that. We are in agreement with you. Faithful D. Jones says, I want to release expectations to be perfect and expectations of what I should know. Absolutely. And then Tina Bree says, the idea that I need to be at peace with people, etc., when different relationships don't work out. Absolutely.
So I love all of that. Let's release it. I'm like, just let it go. Saying that's the first step to releasing, right? And so it's so interesting that we talk about this word softness. And so, as Christal pointed out earlier, that I take more of a historical perspective on some of these terms. And unfortunately for us, this is going to be surprising, but not really surprising, that this word softness, when it's applied to Black women, is actually rooted, guess where? Yes, you guessed it correctly. It's actually rooted in anti-Blackness. It is actually a white supremacy talking point, because to identify Black women as masculine was something that they had to do to put us out in the fields. For those who are unique to the United States, right? If they're descendants of slaves or in the enslaved, it was because they were, in order for them to justify putting Black women to work just as hard as Black men, they had to make them seem masculine. They had to make it seem like we weren't soft, we weren't feminine, we weren't women. And throughout the time, it continued on because they had to continue to uphold a certain image of a certain demographic. And in order to uphold that image and that demographic, they had to put the other demographic down, being Black women. And so with that being said, the men now took that, and this is one of those things that they internalized to our detriment, and we ourselves also internalized it to our detriment, but we internalized it because it became a survival instinct. They internalized it because it was a distinct way for them to step away from their own Blackness. And so that's why when you hear the term that Black women aren't soft, Black women are masculine, it's literally rooted and anti-Blackness, which was rooted in slavery. And that's something that I want people to walk away and realize, that our softness looks different because it has to be different. It can't be the same softness of a protected group of individual who's always been protected, who's never had laws against them, who's never had to work a day in their life, if not all, because I don't want people to come on here and be like, oh, she said this. But no, because of our unique circumstances, we had to have a certain hardness. And I'm calling it hardness because it's really a survival instinct that we had to develop, that we had to go. And then as we continue to be conditioned throughout life from various constraints, such as the war on drugs, war on poverty, every single war that they could think of that was supposedly to help, which actually harmed, that was another way that we had to somewhat say, okay, we're going to put this on our back, we're going to shoulder it, we're going to have that thick skin, because it was survival. So when people tell me that Black women are not soft, the first thing I think is like, oh, okay, anti-Black, rooted in so-called white supremacy. Okay, so let's figure out why Black women aren't soft. So then you get with Black men. Black men say, well, I want you soft with me. And so you have to figure out, what does that look like for that particular Black man? Because let's be honest, softness doesn't look like the same for every Black man. So when they say, well, I want you to be soft. So, and then they can't define what that is. They'll be like, well, I want you to be soft, but then they can't define it. So who's left to define what that softness is you. You have to define what softness looks like for you. So for example, if you want to be vulnerable with somebody by telling them your whole truth, then that's your version of softness. Or if you let your guard down because you trust this person, then that's also softness. But because we've been conditioned to immediately put our guard back up, or they've been conditioned to not recognize that this is another version of softness, then that's where we have this disconnect. So when I hear Black men say, I want a soft, submissive woman, because for some reason the word soft and submissive seem to be synonymous, even though it's not. And and it's like, well, what did you do to deserve the submission? But that's a whole nother topic. Let's stick to the word soft. So when you hear this, what is softness? So if you're in a relationship or even with yourself, how do you define softness for yourself? Like, for example, for me, a friend of mine was like, why don't you ever get your nails done? And I said, well, because I don't have time for that. And she said, okay, let's make time for it, because that's softness for her. Having her nails done, her feet done, her hair done, going to get massages. That was her being soft for her and treating herself. And I was like, oh, you know what? Sure, I'll go get my nails done. Hence why I see my nails are done today, because this was actually literally a very recent conversation. So you have to define what softness, and softness could be vulnerability. It could be telling your truth. It could be expressing yourself, or it could just be cuddling, even when you don't feel like cuddling, you know?
That just gave it. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, what does softness look like for me, and when do I feel my most vulnerable or most like myself, right? And I honestly think for me, I would say when I like being outdoors. I like doing outdoor things. So I think when I'm doing, that seems to be as the older I get, I kind of enjoy going out and just feeling the sun, being in nature, that kind of thing. And I think I feel um, just most relaxed, when I'm doing that. Definitely getting my nails done is an annoying chore to me, even though I like how they look when they're finished. Sitting there for an hour irritates me. So I can feel what you're saying. But I think when I'm able to that is when if I just go sit outside on the porch, or if I go, out and be with the horses or something, that I don't feel stress. And I think List with Morgan said earlier, you can't be soft in survival mode. And so I also want to point out, I know we're going to get into boundaries a little bit later, but I think that a lot of times we put ourselves in relationships. Maybe you're attracted to someone, or you like that person, but that person doesn't bring the best, that person doesn't make you feel safe. I've been in a relationship with someone that did not make me feel safe. And when you don't feel safe, you cannot, the best part of you doesn't come out. And so he doesn't get the best of you because he doesn't bring it out. And so I think that, we have to learn to recognize that in ourselves. And even friendships, there's certain women, I can be around that I'm on guard, or I know I don't trust this person. And I've learned to kind of trust my intuition. And so I like being around people that make me feel like I can be relaxed and I can be the best version of myself, So I would say that was my version. That's my version of feeling soft. Tina says, very seldomly am I soft. I definitely need help with this. What would you suggest, S&M?
So at first I would have to understand what do you mean by very seldomly? Like, do you walk around with resting bitch face? I need to figure out what exactly is seldomly, right? And or are you one of those individuals who always on guard? And if you're one of those individuals that's always on guard, then the question becomes, why are you always on guard? Is it because of the environment that you're in? Is it because of the work that you do? Or what exactly is the reason that you're always on guard? Okay, so it is on guard. Okay, so is it because of the environment that you're in? Is it the work that you do? Or is it just on guard with men in general?
It could also be from past experiences. Sometimes we develop that exterior, that defense from our childhood.
True.
And things that we may have seen, or things that could have even been passed down to us. Because sometimes it's not what we experienced, it is what our mother, grandmother, aunts experienced and passed down to us. Because you meet some women, it's like everybody in their family is like that. And they're actively, walking in that, although they may not have experienced the trauma themselves.
That is true. That is true. So, depending on why you're always on guard, will depend on how you can actually work on that. And so, if it is from you watching other people or from family trauma, then that's something that you actually may have to seek additional help for, right? External help, because you have to unpack those circumstances. If it's because of the environment that you're in, then it's just a matter of trying to remove yourself from that environment. If it's a cultural issue, right? Because, we do have, let's be honest, we be on guard in our culture too. Let's be honest. If
Mhm.
it's something cultural, then you have to figure out what part of that. Okay. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm sorry, I had a flashback because I'm a middle child too, and so in other words, it was like being a middle child, seen but yet unseen at the same time. Where it's like, oh, I'm here. Raise your hand, you're here, and so definitely that. And the crime in the cities. Whew, Whew, I can't even explain that because there's nothing that we can do pertaining to crime in the cities other than, and I would say this is actually a form of being on guard though, is that making sure that you have self defense. Like if you live somewhere where you have, like, for example, I carry, but so if you don't get your concealed carry license or take self-defense classes or something like that, so that you feel more prepared, and then of course that readiness if it's because of the crime in the cities, and if it is that, then perhaps find a way to start removing yourself from wherever that area is, because sometimes you have cities where there's pockets of crime, and then you have areas where it's not so much, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the suburbs, but it could still be in the city, but there's different pockets. So doing that research to figure out what part of the city has the type of crime, because you can have some places, interesting enough, the suburbs actually have high property crime rates. They may not have other crime like the murder and so forth, but they actually have high property crime rates. So just figure out what works best for you, what makes you more comfortable, right?
Mhm.
Yes, look at you. You already on it. You already on it.
Love
So,
that. You're already preparing for a better 2026. We are talking about our love journey in 2025, and what does that look like? Our love journey, not necessarily with anyone else, but really with ourselves. And that's what this conversation is about. This time, we're going to read a few little excerpts from our books that kind of speak to all this that we're talking about. So we know that we're focused on we are accountability, healing, softness, and then joy. We got to get to joy next. I'm sorry. So joy to me is something that is just in you, and I think that that's a really good question, Liz with Morgan. We will definitely address that because that's a big thing in our culture. But I think joy is something that is not happiness. It is a feeling of being content with yourself, that being comfortable in your own skin. To me, and I think happiness is something you can be happy, you can be sad, but I think when you see people that really just they have this glow about them, they are usually people that have experienced um, a self awareness, and they had like that. They've gone through that, and they're able to keep that temperament regardless of what is happening around them. I aspire to be someone that is like that. I know right now when I'm stressed, it just kind of takes over me, right? And my goal is, specifically as I move into 2025, 2026, I want to let go of that ability to let situations and circumstances and people steal my joy. And so I think internal joy has to come from you really feeling confident in where you are, knowing that what is for you will not pass you. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. You are working on becoming a better version of yourself, but you do not have to be perfect. And you can sit in that. And it doesn't mean that life is going to be perfect or life is always going to be happy or you're always going to have everything. But there's a contentment and self satisfaction that I think that you're not trying to be someone else. You're not um, ashamed or embarrassed or trying to hide any aspect of yourself. It's really self acceptance in its fullest form, in my opinion.
see, I love that because for me, joy is the simple things in life, right? Because I agree 100%. Every single emotion is a temporary state, right? And so because everything's a temporary state, so when people say, I just want to be happy, and it was like, okay, well, ma'am or sir, you can't just be like, I want to be happy, because that's not how life really works, right? There's levels to this. There's levels to this life. And while you may be happy for a short time, it's temporary. Contentment is actually where you should be striving for. But contentment doesn't have to be like, oh, I've settled, or oh, well, I can't be happy all the time, so let me just la 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 la. No, this is where joy comes in. This is where you find the little things that bring you joy. Like, for example, I'm a big kid. I'll admit it. I'm a big kid. And so I have toys still. I'll admit it. Today I was at work, and guess what I was in? I was in a fort. You know, I was in a fort at work because it was my birthday. And so these crazy people at my job decide to gift wrap my desk.
Oh, wow.
And yes, yes. And so being who I am, instead of taking the prank, because it was a prank, and instead of taking that, it's like, oh no, you guys pranked me. I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. I'm going to turn this into a fort. And now I'm going to be under this gift wrap in my little cubicle, whatever space, and be in a fort. And that brought me joy because it was like, ha 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 ha. And so it's like the little things, the simple things. Sometimes it could be just like this tea that I'm drinking, sipping the tea and feeling the warmth down my throat brings me joy. It's like finding the little things, because as we know, life right now is so, I'm going to go ahead and use the word traumatic because it seems like there's something new every day that continues to change, be it economically, be it politically or whatnot. And so sometimes you have to focus on the little things that you can identify that makes you happy. Drinking tea makes me happy. Earlier today, I had a salted caramel mocha, and it was like sugar in my mouth, a sugar mouth explosion. That brought me lots of joy. And that could be why I'm super hyper right now. Or it could be because I just love talking to my peeps, right? So joy.
It is joy. It is
Joy is just finding, to me, the little things that you, a little space and pocket for yourself that's just you. That's just you. And your joy should not be dependent on somebody else. It should be dependent just on you, something that you find extraordinary. You know, some people like to smell roses and flowers, and I'm allergic. And so I'm not, that do not necessarily bring me joy for certain flowers, but other flowers, like you pull a lily out, hey, you know. So it's the little things that you need to find and identify to bring you that joy. And joy is something that you can find every day. It's just taking that time to reflect and see, what is it that brings you joy?
I think there's also like a narrative of being high maintenance is seen as being difficult to please is seen as a prize sometimes, and something that's good. And I think that that is a thief of joy. They say also comparison is a thief of joy. People get online and they're looking at other people's lives and they're comparing, looking at other women's shape and comparing yourself to that. Any type of comparison, be you comparing yourself to someone else's financial status or what they look like or the man they got or whatever, it is all going to steal your joy. And so that's why I just think that it really is about being very happy with yourself. You know, I'm a short, thick person. And for years, I just was like, I wish that I was, you know, tall and thin, you know what I mean? And so I would always, you know, look at, I can't wear certain things because I got little short legs and all this stuff. But then after a while, I got to the point where like, this is not going to change. I can lose weight, gain weight. My legs are not going to get longer. I'm not, you know, this is me. And so you have to learn how to look at yourself and appreciate what you have, the package that you're in, and make peace with that. And I think the sooner we do it, the closer you are to joy and to a life of fulfillment, you know? So I think that our goals are to be accountable, to have healing, to have softness, and of course, ultimately to, you know, to have joy. Listwood Morgan says, what are your thoughts about the ride or die narrative? It needs to die. It needs to die. I personally feel like the ride or die narrative is a campaign for toxic relationships, and it has been a campaign for Black women to settle for less and not to, you know, question, you know, their counterparts often. I think it is a very negative stereotype and something that we ascribe to, kind of like snitches get stitches. Like, no, if somebody is doing something wrong, you need to say something. We look with this situation right now, going on with the whole Diddy doc, and people saying, oh, well, in fact, that's a great segue to one of the things that we wanted to kind of talk about, this whole ride or die thing. Well, I think all of these women, specifically this woman right here, was definitely riding to die, literally, and almost did. Riding to die. Here is Cassie. A lot of people thought that she was in a great relationship. They saw her at the Met Gala. She was on, front row at Fashion Week, and beautiful, beautiful young woman with a billionaire. And a lot of people thought that she was winning. She definitely was a ride or die. Another example of a ride or die in that same situation was this woman, Kim Porter, who actually did pass away. Kim Porter was a ride or die. She was with Diddy during him being with other women. She was with him during all the fallouts, all these different things. She was definitely a ride or die, and that did not fare well for her. Another young woman, during all this stuff happening with Diddy, when all the fallout happened, Carisha comes out and says, I'm going to stick beside him. I'm going to stick beside him. She was definitely seen as a ride or die, but what are you riding or dying for? And if a man loves you and cherishes you and values you, why are we even in the mindset and the culture and the speak and the language of dying? But literally, I think all these three women were women that other women were jealous of, aspired to be, would list as relationship goals, as she's got it all. And what glitters was definitely not gold. If you look at the lives of each of these two women specifically and what they went through in those relationships, I think that it definitely kind of illustrates why I feel like that mentality is so dangerous, and it's definitely one that we need to do away with. We need to do away with valuing other people based on how much money they have and how much access they have, because in all these situations it did not fare well. But also in this idea of sticking with someone when they are hurting us, and I think in many instances, Black women have stood by Black men to a fault when we have been hurt, when we have been stolen, we have been mistreated, we have been neglected, and we still will always say we love a Black man. And we do, but we have to love the Black men that are loving us back and are treating us with respect and treating us like the queens that we are. We cannot just be loving random Black men that are not deserving of that loyalty. So I'm going to rest on my soapbox and give it.
Whew, I was like, whew, Lord have mercy. But no, I'm co-signing on all of that, because the narrative, I will say that at one point, I love the whole ride or die story, right? It was like, yes, ride or die. You know what I'm saying? I'm down for whatever. And then as I was doing research, guess what? Folks, the women were dying. And if they weren't dying, they were being locked up. So why are you riding or dying for somebody who don't even have your best interest at heart? Why are you riding or dying for somebody that's putting you in a precarious situation where you may end up losing your life? And when I say losing your life, I also mean by going to jail, right? Or you may be losing. There's so much more you can lose when you're in this ride or die. And I think our community was so, I hate this narrative. But anyways, our community was so big on ride or die because there was an expectation for Black women to prove their loyalty. And guess where that was to? Guess where that was rooted in? That's right. You guessed it. There are so many things that we do that was rooted in slavery, because at that time, it was like, I have to ride or die because we're in it together. And while we were in it together, that was fine. But somewhere along the way, a certain portion of that in it together changed. Right? A certain portion of that men moved away from fulfilling their part of that responsibility to ride or die, because it was more about, I'm riding or dying because we don't have it right now. So we're going to scrape these 2 nickels together to get where we need to go. Or I'm riding or dying because I need to take care of our kids. We're going to do whatever it takes to take care of our kids. It changed into, oh, I want you to ride or die. Hold this bag for me. Or I want you to ride or die and take this abuse. I want you to ride or die and take the fact that I'm a chronic cheater. I want you to ride or die. And then and if you wasn't ride or dying, then you got gaslit into believing that you weren't a good person because you weren't willing to take the disrespect. You weren't willing to put up with the nonsense. But more importantly, you weren't willing to put your life in danger. All the women that she mentioned, except for what's the last one? What's her name?
Except for Carisha.
That's it. She's the only one who life technically was not in danger, but it was because he was in the process of already changing his image because Cassie already got him for the millions of dollars. So he needed to change his image. And that's why he went to Brother Love. Now, anytime somebody changed their name to Brother Love, run. And if a guy tells you that he need a ride or die chick, run. Because what he's going to do, if you don't run, he's going to run all over you. Because that's why he wants you to be that ride or die chick. That narrative needs to die. And a lot of women need to recognize that's literally not only the sign of a toxic relationship, but it's also a way to keep you in that relationship because there's an element of shame and guilt that you're not riding or dying. You know, we have the song back in the day, Bunny and Clyde, right? And if you notice though, there when the guys sing about Bunny and Clyde, they like all they need in their life of sin is me and their girlfriend, but they're talking about their Glock. But when women talking about this life, you know, Bunny and Clyde is literally the man and they're the bunny to that Clyde and they end up dead. In every single Bunny and Clyde remake, guess where they at? They dead. So don't lose your life over a guy because, and it's not even just, and this is the last thing I would say for this. It's not even just losing your life physically, but you lose your life emotionally. Your spirit dies. There's other parts of you that start dying when you're this ride or die. When you find your hair falling out, it's time to go. Matter of fact, you should have left before your hair started falling out.
Just for coming out, yes.
You know? And so that's
it's not just your life, it could be your light. And you see some women when they've been in a relationship, I feel like it's an excuse for this term that came popular a few years ago, struggle love. And I hate the idea of struggle love because you have so mane men that will say, you know, she was a good woman. She stuck with me through everything. Basically, meaning they cheated on her. They had a baby on her. They done lied to her. They done went broke. She held them down. And now, at the end of all this, after you have wore her out, her prize is that he's finally he's no longer in his prime. He's finally going to give her the prize, which is being with him. And it's just like, we don't have to settle for that. And I think again, that's an unsafe situation. So we're not letting anyone, we're not riding to die. We're not riding to lose our light. We are not ascribing to struggle love or survival love. I don't want anything that I have to be scratching and surviving. And I think that is not a part of our culture. And I think it gets misconstrued where people feel like, oh, that's just how it is. You know, they were, you know, these long-term relationships, it takes a lot. You got to go through a lot. Well, people put up with a lot. Out of those women that, you know, that S&M just spoke about, she spoke of Carisha, who didn't necessarily have to deal with some of the things. We don't know exactly what she did or didn't. We know what Cassie dealt with, but what people are not necessarily talking about publicly is Kim Porter. And Kim was with him the longest. And literally, you know, she lost her life, not due to that, but her light definitely was dimmed on multiple occasions. And so she's a beautiful woman who, with the wrong man, you know, allowed that man to take so much from her. And so I just want to say, like, that example, unfortunately, it's so unfortunate. It's really sad. But I think the lesson in all of that is that character supersedes cash, you know, and when you are in a situation with a person, just because he has the financial security does not mean that you will be secure, you know. And so we are not ascribing to relationships that are taking our good years, are taking our good complexions and our good edges. We're not doing it. we are releasing that narrative tonight. So we want to move on and share with you guys. Like I said, this was basically a combination of our books, which is Black Women Need Love Too, and Dear Alpha Female, It's Not Him, It's You. And so I'm just going to give you guys a quick point from this book. My book was basically an interactive devotional designed to help you attract the love you deserve. There were so many women that friends of mine that were successful career women that were struggling to be in relationships and often feeling like if they were successful, they would not find a partner. A lot of times men were echoing that narrative and saying, oh, you don't need a man, you're this and that. And I believe that is not true. I believe that whatever you speak comes into existence. But I do think that there are certain characteristics and certain behaviors that career women or professionals, specifically women of color, were doing that was keeping them from finding a healthy, successful love. And so one of the things that I think is really important from this book, I just want to highlight two things, and then I'm going to let S&M highlight some things from her amazing book as well. So this one was the list because years ago, I worked with my good friend and client, Chili, on What Chili Wants. And she had this list that became, went viral and people were talking about it. But one of the things that I learned when kind of watching how that played out, and then I was single at that time myself, is a lot of times our lists are based in our own insecurity, right? And so you have this wall up and this professional, this exterior that appears perfect, but really you're very insecure. And I said, is your desire for a marriage based on your dissatisfaction with yourself? When you are self-reflecting, you may find that your ideal man's image was based on your lack of something. So a lot of times what we are looking for in someone else, the reason that we put so many things on this list and have this long, tedious list of things is that we are trying to find someone that fits this unrealistic idea of perfection. And that is not true for us. That is definitely not true for a partner. But if you are looking for someone based in your own lack of something, like if you grew up without much money and that has to be, he got to have money, he got to have this. What are these expectations based in? If they're based in insecurity, lack, or fear, then you are setting yourself up to be in a bad relationship that is probably going to be a struggle situation. I said, once you uncover what's truly on your list, you have to make sure that you are also what's on his list. Because I think a lot of times we are just looking for the right job, the right house, the right car, the right man. And we're not realizing this is a person, this is a relationship, and it is not something that you can check a box off of. And it's also not something that you can use to complete your perfect, cover where you show up and say, okay, now I have it all. That is not the proper way to go about looking for a relationship. And I think a lot of times career women do that. You want the 6-figure job, the 6 feet man, the car that is foreign and all these things. And you're not focused on the internal of that. And I think that can be very dangerous. So I said, create a new list of desirables for your mate based on who you are today, based on the work that you're doing, that we're doing right now, based on that. What characteristics would you want in a significant other that would feed your joy, that would not, and joy has nothing to do with anyone but yourself. So what does that look like for you? And I also said, that the idea of this is to make sure that you are happy within yourself, make sure that you are present for yourself. Because when you're present for yourself, then you're going to attract a person that is drawn to you because of that. It's very, very difficult to attract someone based on a lot of multitasking and chaos, right? I said, in our careers, we are accustomed to juggling many things, but multitasking is not always the answer to success. I learned that success is maximized when you focus on what's in front of you. Consequently, you reap the benefits and are not blindsided by an overactive mind, which is really just the idea of being present, And so I would encourage you all. There's so much more in this book. It's just my journey of being able to kind of disconnect from all the noise that I was focused on and really figure out, first of all, how to make Christal happy, and then what would make Christal happy. And then once I got into that space of reflecting that, the partner showed up really quickly. It wasn't really about the other person. It really was about myself. And so that was my reason for writing the book. I wanted to share that with other women because I really want to let go of this idea that successful career women, specifically successful career Black women, cannot find love and are not deserving of love.
Yes, I love that as well. And you know what? As a matter of fact, when we're talking about the books, one of the um, questions that I had for the audience was pertaining to affirmations, because this is one of the areas in the book that I have called Black Woman, Love Thyself. Because as you know, you can't love someone else if you don't love thyself first and foremost. So when you were talking about the list and redefining that list and what it may look like and so forth, I was like, it actually starts with loving thyself. You know, we are identifying what you want, because sometimes we look for people and as far as what they may be lacking, right? Or what we feel like we may be lacking. And so we're looking for that. So what are some of those positive affirmations? So I would love for the folks who are watching, for the ladies that are watching, to put in a positive affirmation in the chat that they live by, or that they at least attempt to say. I have a couple that I myself tried to say, and there's also some in the book. And so oftentimes when we get so focused on everything else, we forget the beauty inside of us, right? And so sometimes just saying something as simple, and I'm going to read a couple of them, like, what I would like you guys to do as an example is like, today is a new day. And the reason why I say today is a new day is because sometimes we take in whatever happened yesterday and we bring that forward into the new day. And so we are the hardest to forgive ourselves for something that we've done in the past. So it's like, today is a new day. I will no longer, you insert whatever the bad habit was, and will instead focus on, and you pick whatever positive habit that you may have, so, or that you may want to proceed forward. So for example, I would say, like, today is a new day. I would no longer be the sugar addict. But see, that sounds unrealistic, because I know for a fact I'm still going to be a sugar addict. So instead, to be realistic, I would say, today is a new day. I will attempt to decrease the amount of sugar, aka dessert, sweets, and pies that I may eat, so that, and instead we'll focus on natural sugars such as fruits and so forth. And I'm joking and whatnot, but inserting a good habit, bad habit actually works. And because once you start preparing yourself mentally, you literally can move forward with your day. And it also, so what ends up happening is you glow from the inside. And when you start glowing from the inside, because you love yourself from the inside out, then other people are actually attracted to your light. As we mentioned previously, these other women were actually losing their light because they allowed somebody else to steal them. But the reason why they allowed somebody to steal it was because they didn't have that type of love for themselves. They were looking for external validation. And that's one of the things I want to get, to have a, to, for us to walk away from, right? So for example, I am loved. I have purpose. I am divine. I am worthy. I found that in my journey, particularly dealing with Black women, is that sometimes we feel like we have to put in work, that we have to be the workhorses to be considered worthy. That's why we put everybody on our shoulders. And that's why we take care of ourselves last, because we feel like we have to put in the work. And that's part of that survival instinct. You don't have to put in that work to be worthy. You're already worthy. So just saying I am worthy is enough. I'm just going to say one more. And this is a really big one for me, where it's like, I am in control of how I feel. I will not let anyone deter my happiness, or deter my happiness, depending on what part of the country, from South or North. But, and so I personally, this is that external validation piece once again. So if anybody can drop in the chat, what their positive affirmations are, what they say to themselves, that's something that's very important to me when we talk about loving thyself. Another aspect is that self-care piece, right? Like, what do you do for self-care? And what do you do to take that moment? I saw earlier, I think it was Faithful Jones, something had indicated that she was like drinking wine and, spa days, jazz music, that type of stuff is what is her self-care, basically, because that brings her joy. So recognizing that your joy can also be self-care is important too. Now, what I will point out is that this book right here, as you can see back there as well, was created because it's actually a historical perspective of the Black woman relationship with herself and others, and how we've internalized stereotypes to our detriment. So in other words, when we talk about stereotypes, I'm talking about the angry Black woman, the bitter Black woman, the strong, independent Black woman, which, by the way, is a stereotype that we took and ran with it to make it true. And we took it so far, it became to our detriment, as well as stereotypes pertaining to Black men and so forth, and how we can start healing those relationships. Because oftentimes, and this is why I love this, and I'm going to land here because I really want to read out some of the the affirmations in the chat. So this is why I love this, is that oftentimes when we have Black women, we see other Black women, especially if you're an Afro female, the first thing we do is assess each other. We are already immediately assessing each other. And it becomes, well, why do we do that? Because sometimes that assessment can be met with disdain. Sometimes that assessment is that we're just trying to figure out where she compares to me. How do I compare to her? And why do we do that? Why do we feel the need to do that to each other, when in reality, you can just stand in who you are and stand in who you be and just be that, right? And so that's another piece that I want us to take away from this as we talk about this journey to self-discovery, is standing in yourself, standing in your own skin, because that also shapes how you interact with other Black women, other people in general, but especially shapes how you interact with Black men, or men, especially if you're looking for love. So, I love this one. I want to just read a couple if you don't mind, Christal.
Yeah.
So Nick Knack. Oh, I like that. Nick Knack, give a dog. But anyways, I am enough and deserve the best of me for me. Yes. And this was Morgan. I release the version of me that was created in survival mode. I love that too. Let's keep releasing. Today is a new day. I will no longer take on the fears of tomorrow, but pray and release and wait on God. Tomorrow has worries of its own. I will stay in the now. I love that, living in the moment. That's actually called mindfulness, and it's something that's really catching along in our community and whatnot. So those were the ones that I saw. Oh, I like this one too. From Christal. I'm worthy of my dreams and aspirations. Yes. So just think about that as you go through life. At the minimum, if you're really looking for love and expect love, it starts with yourself.
Ooh, absolutely. I love those. And you guys keep those affirmations coming in. We want to continue to do the affirmations. And I want to make sure that we are checking in on a couple of the points that we wanted to get in today. So part of that, earlier, I think it was Tina said that she was on guard all the time. And a lot of times, I think things start with us. And I remember there's a book that Iyanla Vanzant has called Trust. And I learned that because I was very skeptical when I was wanting to, find love again, when I finally acknowledged that that is something that I did want. Because for a long time, I was like, well, I'm fine if I'm single. I'm fine if I'm not. I kind of created this false narrative to make myself feel better. And it's one of those things that, like, the 48 laws of power have, where you disdain whatever you don't have. But that's not true. And that's not a healthy way to live. It is a healthy way to be in war mode, but that is not what we aspire to be in. And so I think sometimes we think that we don't trust others, but we really don't trust ourselves. And one of my friends, like a big sister, told me, she said, you have to trust your own instinct and trust your own your voice, right? And so a lot of times I think we are assuming that a person has the ability to hurt us, but you're not trusting the fact that you are wiser than you were. You have learned from the relationships that you have been in. You have, you have your ancestors and women in your past have instilled so much wisdom, so much promise, so many gifts in us. I think we don't trust ourselves, and it's very difficult to trust someone else if you don't trust yourself. And so I just wanted to point that out, because when we're talking about being on guard, a lot of times we feel like, well, I can't trust other people. But I found out the people that really have a problem with trusting others are usually the people that don't trust themselves, And a lot of times, us as women, specifically women of color, we are so busy climbing that we never stop and say, you know what, I'm proud of you. You're doing a good job. That self-affirmation that we're giving ourselves now allows us to trust we trust the woman that we're becoming. So I'm not the same girl that I was when I went through, the same young woman I was when I went through divorce the first time. I'm not the same woman that I was when that person was able to trick me or get over on me. I've learned from that. I've become wiser. I love myself. I put energy into me. And so I do feel, I do have the ability to take care of myself. I have the ability to make sure that I find a partner that is a great complement to me, as opposed to just feeling like that I'm at risk, to be taken advantage of. I think we're not that damsel in distress. We are smarter than that. We understand I can be loved, and I'm able to love. I think it all starts with the ability to understand that I am enough, right? And then I can make decisions that will do well for my future, that will fare well for me. And I think a lot of us don't trust ourselves. We trust ourselves when it comes to career. We may trust ourselves to, put together, specifically with career. Like we are usually, Black women are constantly, at the forefront of education and leadership and things like that. But when it comes to that vulnerability that you often need in a relationship, a lot of times we don't trust ourselves to be vulnerable and to break, but not to bend, but not to break. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. It does indeed. I actually think that actually kind of leads to the segue about boundaries in our relationships and how we can put those boundaries in place. Because if you don't trust yourself, then you're more likely to have all type of walls and boundaries up simply because you don't trust yourself. But we also recognize that boundaries are necessary. You need to have boundaries because let's be honest, if some of those folks in the Diddy reckoning, if they would have had boundaries in place that was firm, they wouldn't have been in the position that they were in, regardless of if they were chasing fame or not, or if they were chasing money or not. It started with them establishing their own boundaries and putting their boundaries in place. So when it comes to moving forward in different aspects of your life and so forth, it's almost like when you look at relationships, are there boundaries that you have in place? Like what boundaries do you have in place for yourself when you're looking for a relationship? Now, I'm a big fan of if you're in alignment with yourself, then it will come to you, right? You may not necessarily have to go look for it because it's going to come to you because you're already in alignment with yourself. And so therefore you're ready for what's meant to be yours will be yours, right? And that's in all aspects. But at the same time, you also have to know where to draw that boundary, where to draw that line for yourself once you get into a relationship, or if you're already in a relationship, then have you establish boundaries that work for you. Sometimes we get so caught up in the moment or so caught up in the looking that when it's easier for us to fall for something, right? It's easier for us to fall into toxic lifestyle, toxic behavior because we got so caught up in the moment. And I know, Christal, that one of the things that we wanted to talk about was conflict and conflict resolution. And so, before I go even further on that part, it would be great if we can talk about like exactly where we're going with this conflict resolution as it pertains to relationship and where we are with that.
Absolutely. Well, communication was the next thing, and that brings us to conflict resolution. And when S&M and I were talking about having this workshop, we realized that in healthy love skills, for African American women of color, we have to talk about the difference between, well, we have to talk about two very, very important issues, which are emotional intelligence and conflict resolution. And I think that both of these things often show up. I mean, social media is a playground for everything that is wrong, in culture. And so you see a lot of people acting out that are not emotionally intelligent, and also are abusing just conflict. Anything that comes up that upsets them and triggers their emotion, they react. And what I've tried to learn myself, and even I talk a little bit about in the book, is that being reactive and acting out based on every time you're hurt or you're threatened is a sign of immaturity. And I think, when we're talking about accountability, we have to understand that emotional intelligence is imperative to maturity and is imperative to growth, right? And that's being able to, number one, understand our own emotions and have a hold on them, right? You can allow emotions to control you. We talked a little bit earlier about how happiness and sadness, anger, all those things are temporary. And so when you are reacting outwardly based on an emotion, you're acting on something that's very temporary. And like I said, it's definitely a sign of immaturity. And I think that's something that we can all, as women, kind of check ourselves on. Being emotionally intelligent means I'm able to navigate feelings without reacting, to them externally. Now, if I need to decompress or I realize I am going through a situation, I think you have to take your emotions seriously. But I think acting out and being out of control, allowing your emotions to control you is unacceptable. And I think as we try to grow, we have to realize you do not get a pass, for that. There has to be a way to feel things without getting outside of control. And I think that goes hand in hand with conflict resolution, because sometimes a person can say something to you that you disagree with, but that doesn't give you a license to become, I know we all hate this word, but this is a safe space, so we can say combative. I know that there are a lot of stigmas attached to that, but I'm speaking of the part that we can control, right? And so how you handle when you disagree with someone, or even when someone has hurt you, how you handle other people and what they're doing really says more about you than it does about them. I was watching Ready to Love, and on my YouTube channel, we recap that show, and it shows basically like a case study of dating in 2025. And so there was a man that called a woman outside of her name. Now, he did this in the presence of men, but some women came back and shared it with the young lady that he was speaking about. And I, of course, myself, I was like, what? You hear the B word, and our instinct is to react and get upset. Just you could see the change in the physicality of, just being on guard and being ready to attack. Well, the brother came over to the young lady in the next episode, and he asked her, he speak to her, and he asked if he could apologize. And I was so impressed with this young lady, because she definitely, you could tell that it had upset her, and she acknowledged that she was embarrassed, but she allowed him to speak, and she did not interrupt. She did not allow her emotions to be out of control. And at the end of the day, I don't agree with a man calling a woman outside of her name for any reason. However, her reaction to his foolishness said more about her than it did about, it's not really about the other person. It's really about how you don't allow someone to take you outside of who you are. And so I think that's definitely something that we have to dig into. We have to dig into, how do we deal with conflict? I know for myself, that was a difficult thing. A lot of times I would try to avoid conflicts, or I would lean into it to try to get the upper hand. And both of those things were wrong, because basically I was trying to make sure that I had control. But at the base of all that was me not trusting myself, right? If I trust Christal, then I know no matter what someone else can say, they cannot take me outside of who I am. And so I think as we move into 2026, in relationships of all types, not just with our significant others, but even in the workplace, you see people in the workplace feel threatened, and then we see conflict turn into something else, and it can affect how you are taken at work, your ability to move to the next level and to lead as an entrepreneur. If I did not learn conflict resolution, I would have been constantly without clients, because I had to learn how to deal with people that I didn't agree with in a way that would not destroy the relationship. So I just think that we have to take accountability with that, look at that, make sure that we are not being controlled by our emotions. I hate that often men will say, well, women are so emotional. First of all, people are emotional, not just women. People are emotional, and no one should allow emotions to control them. And people that do that, like I said, it's obvious that they are struggling with maturity, in that way. And so that's something I think we definitely have to speak about when we're talking about Black women loving ourselves and showing up in a better way.
So I would just say, so first of all, I just want to call out, hey, you there really quickly. Flexible boundaries, like a cell membrane, that scares me, because technically your boundaries should not be flexible as a cell membrane, because that means things are going in and out, in and out. And if you're allowing that in and out behavior, then you're actually not putting boundaries in place. So to say flexible, however, you did point out something while Chris will talk about pertaining to conflict resolution, the whole stop in DBT, right? I actually love this because it allows you to process, right? To manage and process like intense emotions so that you don't have to be impulsive, right? Because you're pausing and you're trying to respond mindfully to a stressful situation, such as a situation that Crystal just described. But not everybody's going to fall back into or even know the term stop in DBT, right? And so please feel free to put more information in the chat pertaining to that, because that is a way to manage extreme emotions in a time of need. But going to some of the basics as far as conflict resolution, when we have conflict, and this is between anybody, man and woman, woman and woman, and so forth, is that oftentimes we don't even recognize that communication don't just consist of us speaking. It don't just consist of us listening, right? It actually consists of our tone. It consists of our body language. It consists of so many elements. So even though you feel like you're yeah. Sorry, I got distracted reading about the molecules. Okay. So even if you feel like you're being mindful of your tone, your body language may be saying something else. You may be defensive, or you may be rolling your eyes, not even recognizing you're rolling your eyes. And that also can make the conflict worse. So it's being mindful of what you're doing with your body, what you're doing with your tone, in addition to what you're saying, in addition to listening to what's being said to you. Oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this as well, where I would listen, but am I really listening, or I'm just hearing? Because to be honest, I'm listening to respond versus listening to take in what's actually being said. I can say that sometimes, and I'm guilty of this in my own relationship, where I'm supposedly, and I'm saying I'm listening, but in reality, I'm listening so I can just jump in and respond and defend myself. Sometimes there's opportunities where you don't have to defend yourself. It's just a matter of taking in what they're saying. And this is no matter what the relationship is, so that you can process what they're saying so that they can feel heard. Just feeling heard sometimes is enough to cause or deconflict, right? So it can bring the tensions level down just by being heard. And at the same time, there's also this whole the tone, and you can be thinking that you're being respectful, especially when it comes to men, because sometimes men will say, "Oh, you weren't being respectful in your tone," and you're thinking, "But I was. I didn't curse you out. I didn't call you the son of Sam or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Or I didn't use this tone. I thought I was very respectful, but their interpretation of your tone was not correct." Now you can't help that. That's on them 100%. But as long as you know what you're doing is being mindful of your tone, being mindful of your body language, that you're not closed off or you're not listening, then that's also how you can start with conflict resolution. It's amazing because people say, "Oh, women can't get along," right? And so, oh, nice. I like that. Okay, stop. Focus. It's the science side, the scientific part of me that's coming out over there. Okay, so they say women can't get along, right? They say women are catty towards each other and women do this. That's why you don't have a lot of women friends. And I disagree with that. I actually have a lot of women friends. You know why? Because we work on conflict resolution. We work on listening to each other. We work on identifying each other's needs and recognizing when we step out of boundaries with those, like step out of bounds with whatever their boundaries are. And so we can talk it down in the same way. So when they say, "Oh, women are naturally catty," I rebuke that statement. We are not naturally catty, but we can be combative. But more importantly, we also recognize, so I think that in general, we as women, we actually have a tendency to have high emotional intelligence. The problem is sometimes there's a stagnation between expressing ourselves, because we get so caught up in our actual emotions of that we kind of get stunted in expressing what we really want to say. And if we feel like we don't have an opportunity to express ourselves fully, then that's when we kind of fall back into what I consider negative communication styles, right? Like, for example, the silent treatment, which I hope people do not use the silent treatment unless it's about to lead to some type of violence, in which case, yes, please walk away if that will help get the situation. Because sometimes it's called putting a pin in it. Sometimes you got to put a pin in it, walk away, and then come back to the situation. And so this is just super important. I think that this is a great opportunity for us to reflect in regards to how do we manage conflict? Like, what do you do? Are you a runner? Do you run from conflict? I know for a long time I actually avoided conflict, right? So, but it turns out by avoiding it, I just made the conflict worse. By
Yes.
running from it, I actually made it worse. So now I can do like how Crystal pointed out earlier, where I was just like, I gotta tackle it, and it's like a dog with a bone, and that also makes it worse. because now it's a matter of let's just move on past that. And I'm not really hearing or listening to what's being said. And this is something that I still struggle with to this day. And it's a life lesson. It's like lifelong learning.
I agree 100%. I think that I think that, we're always on a journey. I am learning to deal with conflict in a better way. I think for a long time, specifically in our culture, a lot of times if you're not the type of female that will meet conflict head on, people will think that you're soft. And that used to bother me. So I felt like I had to kind of overcompensate for that. But what I learned is that whenever you're trying to be something that you're not, is when you're going to feel uncomfortable, right? And so I'm not a loud, boisterous person. I can be firm, but I don't need to try to be something that I'm not just because I feel like that's what people respond to. I had to figure out what works for Christal, but avoiding it will not work because it's that passive aggressiveness, and then by the time it does come out, it's in a whole different place, and that is a sign of immaturity. And so what I try to do is be honest with myself and just have honest conversations and do a lot of self-reflection on a regular basis. If something is making me uncomfortable, number one, I had a situation, just a brief example, where I was in an industry where there were a lot of people that I was interacting with that made me very uncomfortable. There was always conflict. And so what I had to do was make the decision to move outside of those working relationships because it wasn't healthy for me. There was constantly conflict. And I did not like constantly having to have these, this situation that would always be toxic, and so even in a work environment, nothing is worth my peace. Nothing is worth my joy. And so I had to learn how to remove myself from those situations, and not just stay in things that were going to bring out, the worst in me. Now, when it comes to relationships, with my husband, we're still learning each other's style. We've been together for 5 years, but he is the type of person that needs to go away and get quiet, where I like to communicate right here, right now. But one thing that I did learn from a therapist that I've tried in our relationship that has worked, and so I want to share with you guys, is that because I am a talker, obviously I talk for a living, he does not. So I'm ready to talk and communicate. He is ready to shut down. And so what I do is I decide, okay, we're going to have a conversation about this, but we put a time limit on it. So it doesn't go on and on and on, because those of you in relationships, men get extremely like, all right, what are we talking about? And it becomes like they're not even listening to you after a while. And so what I'll do is we're going to have this conversation for 20 minutes and then let's let it go. And then we can revisit it at another time. And that way I don't get worked up because we're talking over and over again. I feel like he's not hearing me. And that's in a digestible amount of time that he can deal with it. And it doesn't feel like it is just hammering because the same thing on him over and over and over again. And so we let it rest and then come back to it, but also communicate and don't just do a stalemate and not speak. Then it keeps the relationship in a good place, but it also allows us to revisit with fresh ears and fresh eyes on the situation. And that's something I definitely would suggest that people do. Put a limit so that you're not just involved in this embroiled, argument, because sometimes you guys may not see each other's standpoint, but you need to be able to put a limit so that it doesn't seep into other areas, and then revisit it with a fresher mindset.
So I have wanted to expand more on the word stop, by the way. And so I just posted in the chat and I saw that it broke it down into two. So just super quickly for those, it basically means stop, just like how Christal, you actually was describing it as I was putting it in the chat about stopping, take a breath, or step back, observe, and then proceed, right? So it allows the opportunity to create the necessary space between reacting to what's taking place, and so you can react intentionally and mindfully. And so I saw that it broke it up, and so it was ironic that you're not even ironic, but it was cool that you was mentioning this as I was literally writing the chat. You actually implement this in your life as well, and so I do agree 100%. And so I also saw a comment here from Ray Alexander, where we underestimate the importance of social class compatibility. Ooh, this is a fact. in dating and marriage, especially as more women increase their education to enter high tier, high income, high status careers. And I was just going to, that is a fact. As a matter of fact, I'm a big fan of dating within your tax bracket or dating within your education level, because there was a study that was released that showed that those people who did not date within their tax bracket or education level, depending on what was most important to them, had a higher chances of divorce, simply because they weren't considered yoked, right? They weren't considered equally yoked, or and that's interesting enough, because there were at one point, when you think about the Bible and so forth, for those who are Christian, they always talk about being equally yoked, and people think about that in terms of religion, but in reality, it can actually be in terms of education level, it could be in terms of class, it could be in terms of social economics. There's so many ways that you can think about being yoked. So that's an excellent comment. You're on mute.
Oh, my bad, guys. I said I agree with that 100%. And I think it kind of brings us to personal, well, desire, worthiness, and choosing from wholeness. Releasing, and we said releasing survival mode and choosing aligned love. So that's exactly what that really speaks to, is not being, none of us, no, none of us are desperate for love. There is no lack of love out there for you. And so making choices that will align with what you see for yourself in your future. I think when you get in alignment with yourself, then you are automatically going to attract someone that mirrors that. And if you don't, you will be able to see it, And I think that making sure that I think part of releasing survival mode is also not slipping into relationship and intimacy with people that don't align with where you're, the direction that you're moving in, and I think when you are really in that space, that just naturally happens. So you're not in danger of that. When I see women that are involved with men or significant others that are not a reflection of them, I feel like that woman doesn't really know herself, or she doesn't feel worthy, right? And so that's a really big part, I think, of that, is the understanding that you are worthy of the things that you want in life. You're worthy of that. So how we pick our partners, or how we pick the people that we choose to become intimate with, really is a reflection of what you believe about yourself. So again, that just kind of speaks to the importance of choosing love that is aligned in every area. And I don't think that's just in romantic love. I think that's in friendship. I think that's in partnership. I think, why S&M and I were, excited about working together, is because we realized that what we were doing, there was alignment, there. And I feel like I had a lot of respect for what she's doing. She had respect for what I was doing. And so it made sense. But I would not want to present, and do things with someone that I was not in alignment with when it comes to any area of my life, So I think that we have a right to speak what we want, and when it shows up, be able to recognize that and receive it and walk towards it.
So I definitely love that. And you know what's interesting, when you were speaking on this, I was actually thinking about, like, in the new year, we always come up with our New Year's resolutions and so forth, and what we're taking into the new year, what we're leaving behind in this year. And so I would love to see what people are planning on taking into the new year. I would love to see what people are leaving behind. So either post in the chat what you're leaving behind or what you're taking into the new year. And I think, as a matter of fact, we have some suggestions in regards to things that you can create, like Christal book, how she stated that there's a checklist of emotional needs list, checklists, and so forth. There's personal boundary statements that you can actually create as you look at your vision for love in the new year, because oftentimes you speak into existence what you want. And then once you speak into existence what you want, you actually subconsciously and consciously start making that effort to get the things that you want, because you've already spoken to it existence. But sometimes you may need that little extra help to write it out. I found that myself personally, writing out some of my goals. So I'm a big fan of vision boards. People, yeah, I'm a huge fan of vision boards. It's crazy because I have I work with a nonprofit organization, and every January we do a vision board with the youth and identifying their goals, their aspirations and dreams and so forth. And I too work and identify my goals, dreams, and aspirations because I'm always envisioning the future. I'm always looking ahead. And so it is crazy. So I see that, hey there, says she's leaving behind the vision board mess.
Jonah says, I struggle with being emotionally available all the way around, so I'm hoping to move into my new year being emotionally open. You are moving into the new year being emotionally open. We are going to challenge everybody to do a love vision board, and that is, or even, it doesn't even have to be a board. It could just be your love vision for the new year, and understanding that that starts with self. And I think for me, I would just say, I know I'm going to write it out, but I know that what I want to do, the first step I want to do in loving myself is really giving myself the grace that I afford other people. I am always, if somebody irritates me, or I get into it with someone, or they have a shortcoming, I will try to figure out why they have that. And then I will automatically, give them grace based on that. And so the first thing I want to do with my love vision for 2026 is to afford myself that same grace, because I'm so hard on myself. And I'm that kid that, if I got a 98, I was pissed because I wanted 100. And so I think that, and moving into 2026, I have been hard on Christal for a really long time, and she deserves some grace. And I think in giving that grace to myself, that will automatically extend to my significant other, and outwardly, from there. But I think that for me starts the love for 2026 with myself is, realizing that Christal's not perfect and it's okay.
So I'll go ahead and start with mine. I talked about health as far as mental health, anxiety, depression, and so forth, and just taking care of yourself. So what I recognize is that I kind of fell off the wagon on taking care of myself because I allowed myself to get so busy and so caught up in all the changes that have been transpiring that with the economy, with society in general, and then as far as my own career aspirations and goals and so forth, that I neglected myself. So, for example, I found that I'm now back to being borderline anemic. And so, like, forgetting to take iron supplements, it's not that hard to take the iron supplements. So, the fact that I'm forgetting, or the fact that I'm not taking those days to just relax, to just rest. I'm one of those people where if I'm chilling at home, I'm also folding the laundry, or like I'm multitasking at the same time. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch Netflix and or whatever I'm going to watch, but at the same time, I'm also folding clothes. I'm also maybe doing the dishes, and like I'm always multitasking. So I also want to take the moment to just be in the moment of whatever that moment may be, to include hanging out with friends. Over the course of the past year, I kind of became a hermit, which is amazing because after we came out of COVID, I was like, I'm going to be out all the time in the streets because I can't believe that COVID had us in the house. I'm going to travel. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I did not do any of that. As a matter of fact, I may have just doubled down into the house because there was other things that I was looking at that I was trying to get done as well. So I'm going to actually focus on the self-care for myself because I realized that I've actually been neglecting myself. And when I neglect myself, it actually makes me moodier in my relationship. It may make me react negatively a little bit faster than what I would normally do, simply because I've been neglecting myself. And so that's what I'm going to start off as part of my vision. I'm also planning on traveling more as well, right? And so I already got my first trip scheduled with Seamless Travel. So first trip scheduled already.
I love that. I think in addition to so we want you all to do a love vision, also an emotional needs list, because I think that, a lot of times we are attracted to people, but we don't know what we want, right? And I think that's, I hear that from men a lot. Women don't know what they want. And then I realized I didn't really know what I wanted, or maybe what I needed. And so I think for me, I would say on my emotional needs list, the first thing I need in a partner or a significant other is someone who, really, really sees me for myself. And in order for someone to see me, then I have to be willing to really show them that, and I have to be willing to be vulnerable in order to get that back. So it's hypocritical and non-productive of me to need someone that sees me and validates that if I don't allow them to do that. And so, like, I'll give you guys an example. Oh my gosh, I had jury duty this week, which was very, very taxing. It was a child molestation case, which was very triggering and just very emotionally exhausting. And so I was taxed with, being one of the only people on the jury that found this man guilty. And so I usually just keep my problems to myself, right? Because I feel like I can work them through in my head. My husband, I'm not gotten used to just sharing problems yet, because I'm still in the mode of Christal has to figure it out. And so instead of doing that, I was really overwhelmed with it. And so I just had a conversation with him and told him that I was really struggling with what I was going to do. I was struggling with, do I stick to my guns because I'm 2 out of 12 people believe this way. And so I felt like, I can't make a difference. I cannot make a change. And so I talked to him. He happens, and I forgot that he was a criminal justice major. And so he had some really good advice, and I took it back, and it actually worked out. You know what I mean? It worked out. And it actually swung by sticking to my guns and stating what I wanted and stating questions, as opposed to being, afraid to confront it. We ended up being able to sway the other jurors over to the other side. So it's just a small example of like allowing people in, and because I want to be seen and I want to be appreciated. So I think that for me on my emotional needs list, I have something for others, but I also have something for myself.
So earlier I mentioned that as part of my I was releasing the strong, independent Black woman narrative, and that it was okay for me to ask for help and to receive help. And so earlier, there's this individual who I know, and he actually critiques me about the fact that I seem to have a hard time receiving help. Like, I have no problem giving help, I have no problem assisting, but when it's time for me to either ask or receive, I actually have a problem with it. And it's not that I had a problem with it. Okay, so I did have a problem with it, but it was because of that I'm strong, independent woman narrative. I can do this. I got this, because that's the way I was taught. I also have a background where I was in the military, and in the military, you suck it up and you do it yourself, right? And so having that background coupled with the cultural understanding of that narrative, of the strong, independent Black woman narrative, it was like, well, I don't want to have to ask for help, right? I don't want to have to receive help, because then that means I'm not strong. I'm weak. And I can't be weak, but it's okay, because there's no such thing to me anymore of being strong or weak, right? It just is. It's okay to ask for help. And so that's on my emotional needs list, because I recognize that I actually fell at doing, like, receiving help. Like, I can give help all day if you need me. And that's also part of that superwoman mentality that strong, independent woman carry as well. Well, I'm going to be superwoman, I'm going to be this for everybody, but then don't get it in return because I'm not asking for it in return. So that's what's on my emotional need list, is it's okay to not be okay and ask for help.
I love that. Well, our last thing on the action steps for love goals is a personal boundary statement. Woo. And like I told you guys when we first started, 2025 was exhausting for me, because there were a lot of people that are very close to me that I love, that did not set boundaries. I just did not set boundaries. And some of those boundaries were being pushed by them, and some of the boundaries were being pushed by myself. I tend to overextend and then become overwhelmed. And so what I am doing this year is I am making sure that I do not overextend myself. I used to see that as a kind of like a badge of honor, that I could go over and above for everyone else. And I didn't realize it, because I thought I am doing it because I'm a nice person and I want to help other people. But it's also because I just didn't feel worthy just with Christal. I didn't feel like Christal was enough. I felt like Christal had to do over and above, in order to receive love. And so I kind of got to the point, I kind of hit a brick wall this year. And so I realized, you know what? Anyone that does not love me unconditionally, does not love me for me, I don't need that love. I don't need that love because it's not real love anyway. But it again, the lesson starts with self, and realizing that was a narrative that I told myself, and I was showing up that way, and then others were taking advantage of it. And so what I'm doing now is I am not overextending to anyone in my life. I love my family. I love my friends, and I'm always going to try to be there for them. However, I am not going over and above for anything, because that puts me at a deficit. And so this is not something I have ever done in my life. I have always, went to the extent that it makes me uncomfortable. But that's no longer going to work, because this year I ended up so anemic that I almost needed an iron transfusion, literally. And so besides that, I was just so many other areas of my life were just depleted because I was just overextending to everyone around me. So that is, I can extend, but it won't be over, and it has to start with me. So that is one of my personal boundaries for 2026.
So interesting enough, that did happen to me. I ended up with 6 weeks worth of iron infusions because I failed to say no, and I did overextend, coupled with the fact that I was not taking my supplements and so forth, and eating properly and so forth. That's why I saw the seeds concept. I love that because I wasn't doing it. So now my personal boundary is no. I can say no. And it's okay for me to say no. And it's okay for me to stand on that no, because oftentimes I'll say no, but then I'm like, oh, I feel guilty. I probably should help. Let me see what I can do. And that's when it goes downhill. That part when I say, let me see what I can do. And it's downhill from there, because whatever it is, I know I'm gonna have to go over the top, because I tend to be an overachiever. So I can't just do exactly what you asked. I gotta do a little bit more, unless it pertains to money, in which case you're going to get exactly what you asked for if I said yes on that. But so for me, one of the personal boundaries that I'm putting in place is no. I'm saying no. It's okay to say no, and no is a complete and full sentence. I don't have to say no because, or no, and then add additional input or query or whatever the case may be. It's just no. And that's what I'm going to stand on as my personal boundary to get started, is that no. It's okay. You are on mute.
I keep forgetting. I'm going to aspire to know. I know that's still difficult for me, but I'm definitely not going to go over. But you know what? I am going to have to say no as well, because sometimes I notice that there's some things I don't want to do with my career, and if I don't say no, I'm going to end up continuing to do them. So I think this is a great place for us to put a pin in for 2025. This has been, if you joined late, this was basically Love Begins With You, a workshop that was a journey to self-discovery by myself, Christal Jordan, and S&M Jones. And we are two authors that focus specifically on women of color, and our conversations and our focus is on building us up and making us stronger. And so we came together to present this workshop. Hopefully, if you see this, you can share this with a friend. It's like a little therapy for us and for you and for all the women that join. And we're going to be doing more of these, in the future. But we wanted to come on right before Christmas and encourage everybody that is watching. If they don't have a copy of both of our books, I put the link to both of them in the chat. And you can see, yes, we have both the books here. Black Women Need Love Too, and Dear Alpha Female Is Not Him, It's You. Like I said, we are going to be doing some things together, but if you want to get copies of the book, they're both available on Amazon and a whole bunch of other places. I'm going to put the link to both of them again in the chat. so that you guys can grab a copy for Christmas. I think both of them would be great gifts for women in your life that need to reboot. This is the link to Black Women Need Love Too. It literally is an amazing book. It's literally when S&M gifted it to me, I told her I wanted us to work together because I think our books are great compliments to each other, and both are in the spirit of uplifting and loving on our sisters, which is something that both of us are committed to. And this is the link for Dear Alpha Female. And then lastly, before we end today, I know we wanted to ask you guys, I think you see down there in the chat, to please share your takeaways on IG, TikTok, and X with the hashtag Love Begins With You. You can just post a picture of yourself along with that hashtag there, which is Love Begins With You. And just let us know that you were watching. Let us know what you took away from tonight's conversation. If you are able to share your love vision, if you want to share your emotional needs list, if you want to share your boundary, the boundary that you're setting for 2026, we would love to see all of that. You can tag both of us on social and just let us know what that is, or in this chat. If you're watching this on the replay, you can tag it in the chat and let us know, and both of us will be looking at the comments and responding. And then also stay tuned to both of our channels, because we are going to be doing another one of these pretty soon in 2026, kind of like regrouping with all of you, and hopefully a lot more women that will be joining in. And then, like I said, we're going to be doing some things together on the road, but we definitely will be doing another virtual workshop just to check in, just do a little check in with everybody to see how you're moving forward with the goals and the affirmations that you set for the new year.
So I just want to say thanks for joining us, by the way. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you, Christal. And then just in case those who are not familiar, my tag across all social media is the S&M Jones. So at the S&M Jones, you'll be able to find me if you're interested in following. Be sure to follow both of us. If you're not following us, please feel free to subscribe to both channels if you're not already subscribing. So I'm at the BLC Pod. You're at the Real Christal. Well, no, it's Christal XO on YouTube, right? And so just be sure to follow us. Stay tuned. We got a lot of great things coming. I really look forward to hearing feedback if you choose to purchase the books, because one thing we do is listen. So just keep that in mind. And the call to action, I say, let's go. Let's get it.
Let's get it. Well, hopefully, like I said, you guys will share this. Make sure you get a copy of the books if you need. Obviously, hers is very easy to find. Black Women Need Love Too. Black Women Need Love Too, TOO by S&M Jones. And of course, Dear Alpha Female. It's not him, it's you, an interactive devotional design to help you attract the love you deserve. We love you all for watching. We are thankful for having a chance to kind of love on each other. And hopefully more people will watch and leave comments here in the chat so we can all stay connected. And we'll see you guys in 2026. Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye, everyone.